My name is Doris Smith Robinson, and my sister's name is Doris Smith Robinson. I would like to tell you a little bit about her life. I have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Someone needed to tell her story, but it seems as if nobody would tell her story. And now, here I am, 2019, and I'm going to tell the story of Doris Smith Robinson, who she was, and who I came to love as my sister. Through my eyes, I want to tell you who she is to me and who I think she is to the world. Doris Smith Robinson was born in Atlanta, Georgia on April the 25th, 1942, to the loving parents, Mr. and Mrs. J.T. Smith. My mother's name was Alice. She owned her own salon in Summerhill. My father drove a truck and a moving van, and he owned his own business. So both of our parents were entrepreneurs in the little community of Summerhill. Summerhill is located south of downtown Atlanta. And we were living in a segregated community back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It was very segregated. We were not allowed to go to some of the places near where we lived unless we were going in a separate entrance. There were black and white water fountains when we were growing up during the earlier times. And of course, when we got on the bus, if a white person got on, we had to move and let that person sit down or move to the back of the bus. So these were times that it was very segregated. We had an elementary school about a block away from us that we could not attend. So we had to walk about a half a mile to school due to segregation. However, my mother was very focused on education, and especially for her girls because she wanted us to become very independent. So she took us to a school called Rush Memorial, which was on the north side of town, and Doris entered into the kindergarten at about 3 years old, which is extremely young for a child to be in kindergarten. But my mother had already noticed that she was exceptionally smart and she wanted her to progress at her level. So she stayed there until it was time for her to go to, I think it was about the second grade. And she went to E.P. Johnson Elementary School. And from there, she began to participate in multiple activities in her community, several churches, in fashion shows, in Easter programs, Christmas programs. At the school, she was in almost everything you can name, every kind of club. She was a majorette, and she participated in the Honor Society. She was always exceptionally smart and above her peers in her grades and academics. Doris was typical girl growing up. She didn't like to get her hair combed. She was very tender-headed. And another thing Doris did, she did not like to wash and iron her clothes. And back there in those days, we all had strict responsibilities to be responsible for our clothes for the next week to wear to school. And we had to wash on the weekend and iron and hang our clothes up so we would be prepared for the next week. So what would happen with Ruby Doris is that she would not prepare anything to wear. And when it was time for school on Monday, she would wait until my older sister, Mayor Ann, and myself leave the house. And then she would be late for school because she would go into our closet and find her some nice iron clothes, and she would put them on. And when she got to school and we saw her going down the hall, we would notice that she had on our clothes. And sometimes it was almost with tears in our eyes that we saw Ruby Doris and wanted to approach her, but did not want to make a scene at the school. So this was the way the girls were at my house, at our house. And as she continued to get older, and she was participating in high school activities, it was just a lot of things going on in her life. She was always in more than her share of activities and still could maintain an A average. She was a very focused person. She never really did any studying that I remember. She never would stay up late at night studying for tests and things like that. And when I would do that, she would just look at me and say, "Why are you staying up to study? You should know that, and you should already be ready for that. And I don't understand why it takes you so long that you have to study these many hours." So she couldn't kind of relate to other kids who had to do a lot of studying. She didn't have to do a lot of studying. And I think she may have been gifted, but at that time there were no gifted programs. And so she was always accelerated and ahead of herself. And it was very noticeable to other people. And she would help some of her friends in the neighborhood who may have been struggling with their assignments, and she would reach out to them. So she was a very beautiful person. She was not selfish at all. And I didn't see any selfishness in her and her spirit. Later on, we did have an experience at the drugstore about a couple blocks from us. It was in the white neighborhood. We could go to that drugstore, but we couldn't sit down and have ice cream. So on Sundays, my parents we would have a little extra money after church, and we would walk down there to get ice cream cones. So this particular time, it was a white lady in front of us. And the white lady asked for an ice cream cone, and the waiter pulled down the cone and put the tissue on the cone first and pulled it down, and put the ice cream scoop on it and handed it to the white lady. And so the next ice cream was going to be for me. And so I told the lady what I wanted. She pulled it down with her hand. She did not get a napkin. And she put the scoop on there and handed it to me, and I took it and moved to the side so Ruby Doris could actually get her cone. And so what happened was that Ruby Doris got the cone, and she looked at the lady, and I thought we was ready to go. And she said, "Is this for me?" And the lady said, "Yes, you asked for a cone, and I gave it to you." She said, "No, this is not my cone." She said, "Because when the white lady walked up, you gave her a cone, you pulled the napkin. You pulled the cone down with a napkin." And she said, "My sister, you did not do that. And with me, you did not do that." And she said, "So this is not mine." She said, "I want you to put the napkin on my cone like you did the white ladies." And the lady was stunned because she didn't know really what to do. And people in the drugstore started looking, and everybody was wondering, was she going to give her a cone with a napkin or not? And so finally the lady pulled the cone down with a napkin, and my sister accepted the cone. So that was our first one-on-one kind of relationship in the community. with white people and the real true racism right up right up close. So I think later on when the movement came with the Montgomery bus boycott, I think it opened up Ruby Doris's eyes that this is a racist country and we are living in a segregated community. And I think she began to think very strongly that something needs to be done about it. So when she went to Spelman College at 16 years old, the first year, it was a good year for her, and then she went into her sophomore year. This was when her sister Mary Ann was working with the beginning of the student movement, and she heard about it, and she started following her sister to meetings and sitting in the back when she was not even invited. But she would find her a place in the back of the room, sit quietly and listen. She was very, very focused on trying to help find ways to help black people. And when the movement was formed, she was able to get involved along with her sister. She took me on one of the protests, one of the marches downtown. And this was my first march, so I was very excited. And she put me right behind her and everything. And we were marching, and this white older man came over and spit in her face. In fact, he not only spit, he grunted 2 or 3 times in his throat and then got a mouthful of spit. And then he spit it in her face. And she continued to march. And I thought she was going to get out of the line and get somebody to help her. And she just continued like he had not done anything to her. She did not wipe her face. She just continued to march. And after the march was over, I told her, don't ever take me down here again because I don't like this and I don't think this is fair and he hurt you and I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Please don't bring me here again. So that was the first beginning and the ending of me in the student movement. However, my sister got so involved in it until she dropped out of college. By this time, Ruby Doris was between her destiny and getting her a degree. And she was very focused on the movement. However, she knew that she wanted to get her degree at Spelman College. And she wanted that with all her heart. But by this time, something deeper was taking place within my sister. I remember one time she and I sat down and we talked. And she shared with me from the bottom of her heart what she felt like she wanted to do. She told me that she believed that her mission in life was to help black people be set free. And she believed that she could make a difference in this world if she did what was in her heart. And as she was telling me this story, I did not understand anything that she was telling me. I was younger. I didn't have any type of focus in the movement at all, only just to support her and to understand what was going on with her, because I saw such a change in her, and it puzzled me, and I wanted to know more about what was she feeling. And as she expressed herself, I got upset because I did not want her to die. And she did tell me that she was willing to die to help the black people. And I thought that was quite crazy. I thought, no, you should not want to die for anybody. You should want to live. But that was not in her heart. And at that moment, I understood that I could not be selfish. I could not want something much different for her than she wanted for herself. So I started thinking about it very deeply, that this was something that she needed to do in her life. And she was already having a hard time trying to decide whether to drop out of Spelman College to do what she knew was in her heart and in her spirit. So finally she made the decision to drop out of college and to be full-time in this movement. By this time, she had become one of the founders of SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And she began to hold different titles at the SNCC office. And she took leading roles in the SNCC office. And she was a very brave young lady, very courageous. And one day, the policemen were putting tickets on cars outside of the office, the SNCC office, where she worked. And someone told the people in the office, and she heard about it, and she didn't say anything to anyone. She just ran down the steps to where the policeman was putting tickets on the people's cars parked outside of the office. She didn't ask him what he was doing. And he was writing the tickets, and as he was writing the tickets, she was taking the tickets and tearing them up and throwing the paper on the ground. And she didn't communicate with him. It was like she took over, and she was not afraid of him. And I guess she didn't even care if he locked her up. But once she finished doing what she thought was the right thing to do, she went back upstairs and didn't even look back. And the policeman didn't lock her up or anything. He probably knew that they had been harassing those students and that there was no reason for them to be issuing those tickets. And my sister just took a stand because she was that brave. And as time went on, she became the director over the Sojourner Truth Fleet, which managed about 100 cars. And these were cars that the young people, the college students, would be able to go into different parts of the South to help the people, especially in places like Mississippi, where they had to teach people how to read and write so that they could vote. And most of the people could not read, so they needed help. And so people came even from the north to help them learn how to read and how to write. And many other protests was going on in the South. So she had to handle all of that. And she was able to manage that. And that was including a lot. I mean, she had to know where all the cars were at all times. She had to know what cars needed gas and what cars didn't need gas. She had to know what cars need repairs and what cars were ready to go. And it wasn't long, I don't think it was long, or it may have been before, when she had met Clifford Robinson. And Clifford Robinson was my husband's brother, so we married. We were sisters marrying brothers. But Doris married Clifford, and Clifford was a mechanic. And so he had already made up his mind, wherever Ruby was, that's where he wanted to be. And so he became the mechanic for Snit. So they both would go to work together. And it was a beautiful relationship. And they truly, truly loved each other. And it was very good. Ruby Doris continued to march, protest. At times, she was even willing to march by herself. I remember when she picketed the whole grocery store by herself. It was called the A&P store. Many of you may remember that in Atlanta. But no matter if it was rain, snowing, sleeting, sun shining, whatever, Ruby was going to be out there. I remember the times when she went to Grady Hospital to help segregate Grady Hospital. And they didn't want the black people to come in the front door. They wanted them to go in the back. But Ruby went through the front door. And so when they were trying to tell her she needed to go to the back and everything, she was telling them that she needed to be seen because she was sick. And so they was looking at her like, you don't look sick or whatever. And they said Ruby Doris just coughed up and then started vomiting on the lady's desk. And she said, is that sick enough? So these were the kinds of things that Ruby engaged in. I remember someone telling us about the time when they were on their trip to Africa, and some kind of way the trips had gotten confused. And so the people in charge was telling them they were going to have to wait till the next flight. And while they were discussing it, Ruby Doris just found her way, some kind of way to go on the plane without them knowing. And she sat down in the middle of the aisle. And later they just said, okay, you will be able to take this flight. It was like she would not, if she felt that she was being overlooked and discriminated against, it's like she would not take no for an answer. She was always going to stand, and if it meant that she would get locked up, she didn't really care. She had always felt that she was going to make a difference and that she could help black people. And even death, she had told me, it just didn't matter to her anymore. And so she was moving forward. She was in the movement to stay. She was going to see a change no matter what. And finally, she was in the Freedom Ride. And she got locked up and was sent to the Mississippi Penitentiary. And there in the cells were many, many young women, many of them whites from the North who had come to participate. And a story was told to me by one of the ladies who was in the jail that Ruby, because she would not take a shower without having something on her feet, like maybe some flip-flops. And they didn't provide that in the jail. But she refused to take a shower. So the women guard came after her, took her out of the cell, and they took her to the shower, make her take her clothes off, and then they took a wire brush and scrubbed her naked skin in all the very sensitive areas of her body. And she came back to the cell. She was bleeding. She was in a lot of pain. And so the girls in the cell, they started getting real upset. And they wanted to protest. They wanted to come against the women guard, against the prison. And Ruby quietly began to tell them, that's not why we're here. We are nonviolent, and I want everybody to understand that. And she just quietly consoled all the girls in the jail that that's not why they were there, and to focus on the reason, the true reason that they were there and not on her. And when I heard that, I was like, yes, that's my sister. This is the cause that God has put in her spirit. She was born for this. And so now I could see more and more of the vision of why she had to leave college, why she had to focus on what was in her spirit and in her heart. And I wholeheartedly supported her. She was my hero. She was my hero. She continued, and the next thing I knew, she was pregnant. And she was going to have her firstborn. And she started getting sickly after the baby was born. But even before that, she had had to have some surgery before she conceived, because she had gone to jail so many times. It was around 100 days. And many times she had to sleep on the slab of cement, and they didn't have like real mattresses for them. And a lot of the times she didn't have the proper food, and she would write my mother, and she would write the Atlanta Inquirer, who was there for the students to tell their stories so that people could understand what was really going on in the movement in the South. And so she would have different things that happened to her in jail, and then she wouldn't talk about it that much. But a lot of negative things were happening. And so she ended up having to take surgery, and my husband and I took care of her. And this was really before she got married. So it was before she got pregnant and had the baby. But getting to when she had her firstborn, Touré, she named him after the president of Guinea, Africa. Where she had traveled on a trip to Africa. And she loved Touré. Touré was her heart. He was so sweet, and she just loved him. I mean, she put so much time and energy in him. And she and her husband both, they were so proud of Ruth Touré. And as time went on, she got this illness, and then she later died. And we were all just heartbroken, the family. We just didn't know what in the world to do. She was so young, and we were young, so we didn't know how to take it. Like I said, we were just heartbroken that here she is, a young lady at 25 years old, just got married and had a baby, and her life is over. But her motto, I always think of her motto: if you think free, you are free. And I think the day that she took her last breath, even though she felt like she was free, but I felt like at that moment she was truly free. And her vision lives on in the hearts of her son, who is an entrepreneur, her nieces, who are attorneys, and her niece that is now the mayor of Atlanta.
How does one pay tribute to greatness? How does one remember courage? How does one honor sacrifice? I asked myself each of these questions when Councilman Bond asked me to bring remarks on behalf of my aunt, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson. Although I do not feel worthy to speak on her behalf, I am honored to stand here today as a product of all that she lived, fought, and died for. My memories of Ruby Doris Smith Robinson are shaped through the lenses of others. She was only 25 when she died, some 3 years before I was born. Despite her physical absence, her life and her legacy have always loomed larger than life for me. It's no wonder, though, because I have been told that she lived life larger than life. You know the Ruby Doris stories better than I do. Remember the time she went to Jim Crow, Rock Hill, South Carolina to demonstrate, knowing that she would be jailed for over 30 days? Or the time she protested in segregated Mississippi and shared a single jail cell with other 23 student freedom fighters for weeks? Or perhaps you remember when she and the other students were arrested in Atlanta, and when asked her first name, she responded freedom, and when asked her last name, she said now. Or maybe you were there when she boldly confronted Governor George Wallace on the tarmac of the Atlanta airport. Or you may even recall the one-woman sit-in that she staged in New York when she and Julian Bond and John Lewis and Fannie Lou Hamer were on their way to visit King Ture in Africa, and she and other members of SNCC were told that they were being bumped from their flight. Yes, you know the stories better than I because you, the students of the movement, were there. It has been said that Ruby Doris's attention to detail made the dramatic moments possible. Behind every march, there was a planner. Behind every demonstration, there was a leader. Behind every bond posted, there was a fundraiser. Ruby Doris Smith Robinson was all of those things and more. To some, she was a loved one. She was a daughter. She was a wife. She was a mother. She was an aunt. She was a sister. She was a friend. To others, she was a co-ed, a co-worker, an organizer, an activist, an agitator, and a leader. To all, she was dedicated, she was bold, she was brilliant, she was fearless, she was a warrior. When her work with the movement interfered with her studies at Spelman College, she dropped out of school in her junior year to devote herself full-time to the cause. She later returned to complete her studies, all the while juggling her duties as a wife, as an expectant mother, as a full-time staffer with SNCC. She was simply amazing. To many, her life and commitment to the civil rights movement are but a footnote in history. But to those of you who struggle with her in the name of freedom now, I am sure that you would agree that in just her 25 short years of life, the passion and commitment she gave to the movement changed the course of history and changed this world. As the first and only female executive secretary of SNCC, Ruby Doris confronted racism and sexism with a boldness that made men and women alike fear her and respect her. My mother-in-law, I think, described her best when she said Ruby Doris was on fire. She was fierce. I've heard her described as a woman before her time. She sported an afro long before it was popular to do so. And she chanted the phrase Black Power long before the country embraced the term. And she believed that our African ancestry was key to enduring self-esteem long before it became a fad. I don't think she was a woman before her time at all. I think she was a woman who transcended time. She had no way of knowing that her days on this earth would be so few, but she, like so many of you students of the movement, certainly disproved the theory that youth is wasted on the young. Even as her body betrayed her and she lay dying in a hospital room, I've been told that she barked orders from her bed in an effort to keep the movement organized and alive. Some say she died of cancer, and others say it was sheer exhaustion. Whatever the cause of her death may have been, we are here today because Ruby Doris Smith Robinson lived. When my Uncle Clifford, Ruby Doris's husband, was dying just a few years ago, his last wishes were very clear. He didn't want a funeral, he didn't want a memorial service. He simply wanted his ashes sprinkled over her grave. He simply wanted to be with the woman whom he had loved and lost some 40 years ago. It was then that I truly came to appreciate the phenomenal woman that she was and the impact that she had on so many lives. When I asked my cousin Teray if there was anything he wanted me to share on her behalf, he said no. Just going on the record with her name will help her be remembered. So how does one pay tribute to greatness? How does one remember courage? How does one honor sacrifice? Simply, we must remember and we must say thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Bottoms.
And so I can only say that she lived the life that she wanted to live, the life that she felt God gave her to live. And she lived it with all of her heart. She sacrificed her life so that we could be free. This is not the end of Ruby Doris' story. This is just the beginning, because she came from a little girl to a high school girl to a girl in college. She found her destiny, and girls all over this land can find their true destinies. And she's an example that when you find your destiny, do it with all of your mind, soul, body, and spirit. And don't let anyone stop you from that which you know that God has given you. When it's in your spirit and your heart to do something, finish the course. Never give up. And I think this is a lesson that all of us can learn. Always have hope. Never give up. Ruby is not gone. This is the beginning. There is no ending to her story, because life goes on through her and through her vision.